The latest wrestling coach rankings were interesting to say the least, but Penn State benefits from them immensely.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State Wrestling. Thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show. The coach rankings have been re-released for the third time. Some interesting choices, some interesting rankings, but Penn State benefits a lot because it allows certain wrestlers to control their own destiny going into these conference tournaments. And yes, these coach rankings do matter. This is one of the significant criteria when when seeding for the NCAA championship. So let's go through them weight class by weight class, starting with the lightweights, 125 and 133. And those are the biggest question marks for Penn State, as we've discussed, going into the NCAA postseason, conference tournaments, and NCAA tournament overall. And of course, as always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section as we're going to go through these. Luke Lilledahl is at number 8 in these coach rankings, and I think that's fair. I think that's a good spot for him. And Dean Peterson is ranked one spot below him. He's one spot below Caleb Smith as well at that number 8 spot. But what this does is, I think it creates a somewhat of a favorable path for Luke Lilledahl if he impresses at the Big Ten tournament. So right now, if this was the NCAA championships, he's wrestling Matt Ramos in that quarterfinal, and that's not an ideal matchup. He's probably going to wrestle Matt Ramos at some point in the Big Ten tournament. I expect that, maybe not necessarily expect, but I expect Luke Lilledahl to be a serious contender to get to the Big Ten championship. I think he can beat Caleb Smith again. I think he can defeat Dean Peterson and get revenge there. So it's really just taking out Matt Ramos. So for Luke Lilledahl, he needs to at least make the Big Ten championship at 125. And then why that impacts the seeding overall, because this is going to bump him up into a favorable spot. So I think if he impresses at the Big Ten tournament and you're able to defeat Caleb Smith again, or you get revenge against a Dean Peterson, and maybe you do kind of the unthinkable at this point and knock off a Matt Ramos in that Big Ten tournament, you're looking at potentially moving into up to that sweet spot where you might be able to avoid a Matt Ramos. Say you don't do well against him, but you take second in the Big Ten tournament, you might be able to jump up to maybe the 6th seed overall, depending on how the rankings look. So it allows Luke Lilledahl to move himself up into a spot where he would be seeded rather favorably, because outside of Matt Ramos and Richie Figueroa, I know Troy Spratley and Vincent Robinson, those guys are talented, but I give Luke Lilledahl a better chance against them than I do against the Ramos and the defending champ at 125 in Figueroa. So let's move to 133. So Luke Lilledahl actually benefits from being number 8, and if and when he does well at the Big Ten tournament, because I think he will. I think Matt Ramos is the only wrestler that he is not better than at this present moment, but never say never in a head-to-head matchup. Now let's move to 133. So Braeden Davis is ranked 6th here, and kind of like Luke Lilledahl, it's that sweet spot for the rankings where if you do well at the Big Ten tournament, you can bump yourself up into a spot where you actually have a favorable path for yourself to where you're not facing a Drake Ayala or a Lucas Bird earlier than you would like to as that 8 or 9 seed, or even that 7 or 10 seed. You want to try to position yourself as the 3rd through the 6th seed so that you don't have to face somebody that we know is not significantly better than Braeden Davis, but definitely there is a talent gap here at this present moment. Drake Ayala defeats Braeden Davis routinely. Lucas Bird, you at least assume so. Lucas Bird, we saw what he did against in the head-to-head result most recently. So for Braeden Davis, at the 6th spot, he's kind of in that ideal scenario. If this is an indication, at least somewhat, it's a hint. It's a hint at what the NCAA championships could look like. Braeden Davis isn't wrestling Lucas Bird, hypothetically, until the semifinals. And then if he bumps up because he's defeated a Nasir Bailey, I hope that he gets to wrestle a Braxton Brown at the Big Ten tournament. Evan Frost is ranked 3rd in these rankings as well. So we don't exactly know how Frost is going to match up against Davis, but right there, you at least avoid the wrestlers early on that you know that are better than you. Let's go to 141. Beau Bartlett is ranked number 1 overall, as he should be by the coaches. And then why that's important is because Andrew Alirez and Jesse Mendez would project to wrestle against each other in the semifinal. It is one of these three winning at 141 in the NCAA championships. Now, we're going to get Beau Bartlett versus Jesse Mendez, part 5, part 6 at this point in time, part 2 for this season, but with all the times that they met last season and then the 3 last season and NWCA All-Star Classic, they met once in the regular season. So yes, this would be part 6. So for Beau Bartlett, he's in control of his own destiny where he needs to win this match against Jesse Mendez, because if he doesn't, he could go from number 1 to number 3, and then we'll see how that would impact the NCAA championship seeds overall. But Bartlett's in that top spot, as he should be. I've made that argument already that Beau Bartlett's number 1, no matter how you try to argue it, that, well, now where you want to place Jesse Mendez after that is different, and this could all change after the Big Ten tournament. I understand that, but if you're Beau Bartlett, you take care of business, you defeat Jesse Mendez again, then there's no argument to say, well, Andrew Alirez maybe should have the number 1 spot. That's what it does. It solidifies Beau Bartlett's path and then gives him that favorable path so that you're not meeting somebody that where anything could happen. It is really, truly a toss-up anytime any of those 3 wrestlers are going to meet. So if you're the 2 or the 3 seed, you could potentially be knocked out of the semifinal when you have just as much of an equal chance to win an NCAA title between the 3 of them. That's why the number 1 seed is so important, because one of these 3 wrestlers is not making it to the championship based on that semifinal matchup. So the number 1 seed is the most important there. And Beau Bartlett, if he defeats Jesse Mendez again, there's no argument to be had. There's no debate that he shouldn't be the number 1 wrestler going into the NCAA championships, because Andrew Alirez would be the other selection. But if you beat Jesse Mendez twice, then it gets complicated. Jesse Mendez and Beau Bartlett split this season. Do you factor in, do you make considerations from last season as far as how you judge them? Because the coaching rankings are one of the biggest criterion to get the overall seeding there. Now, RPI and everything else, I went through the RPI rankings. I did not like those. I know that's supposed to be an objective measure based on analytics and everything else, but that was rough looking at those RPI rankings and seeing Carter Starocci ranked 9th, for example, at 184. There needs to be, and we're going to discuss that in this show too. So still to come, going through more of these weight classes and where the Penn State wrestlers rank, including Levi Haines at number 1, surprisingly, with Keegan O'Toole defeating him in that head-to-head bout. But should coaches have that much say in these rankings and how they impact the seeding? We're going to get into all of that coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's show is brought to you by Fabric by Gerber Life. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get life insurance that will fit your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You can be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. This gives peace of mind. As a parent, you want to make sure that your family is financially protected no matter what happens, and Fabric gives you that peace of mind. And it's affordable coverage. You get millions of dollars in coverage for less than $1 a day. So protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. And then it goes beyond life insurance. Fabric also offers free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help you plan for your children's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That is meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Let's pick back up with 149. Shayne Van Ness comes in at number 2 in these coach rankings, and that makes sense. I mean, it's Caleb Henson at the top at number 1. That's not what we're trying to debate here, but it's interesting because Van Ness has traded losses and wins between Kyle Parko and Ridge Lovett. Ridge Lovett comes in at number 4. Again, this is meant to be a hint at how are the NCAA championships going to look? How is the Big Ten tournament seeding? How could that look if this is any indication as far as what those seeds could look like? And what that does is, if Shayne Van Ness is the number 1 wrestler in the Big Ten, and we're assuming that Kyle Parko and Ridge Lovett would be 2 and 3, one of them has to knock the other out in that semifinal. So Shayne Van Ness defeated Kyle Parko. Kyle Parko defeated Ridge Lovett, but Ridge Lovett defeated Shayne Van Ness. I know there's other considerations here. This isn't the only measure, but like I said, it's a significant measure for the NCAA championships, and it'll be interesting for the Big Ten championships because I know there's just other factors that are going to be included. For example, a Ridge Lovett could be the number 1 seed, for example, because he was the Big Ten champ at that weight class a season ago, and Shayne Van Ness. So there's just other factors that are involved that it shows a little more subjectiveness in that sense. But that's why the number 2 seed is so important in that case for Shayne Van Ness overall, because you defeated Kyle Parko the way that you did by major decision. You embarrassed Kyle Parko in the Bryce Jordan Center, and you don't know how that rematch against Ridge Lovett is going to go. Now, I want to see Ridge Lovett and Shayne Van Ness go at it in a rematch just to get an idea, okay, where is Van Ness if he does have to face him in the NCAA championships? But if we're talking about path here, at the number 2 seed, you would avoid Ridge Lovett hypothetically, and you could wrestle somebody that you had a favorable outcome against, and then possibly meet Caleb Henson in the championship, and then just kind of go from there. So that's the outlook right now for Shayne Van Ness. Ranked number 7, Dylan D'Amelio. That's somebody that Van Ness could and should meet again at some point in time, either between the Big Ten tournament or the NCAA tournament. And Van Ness, I mean, it went down to the wire against D'Amelio, and I thought D'Amelio wrestled a better match, even though Van Ness happened to get the win. I mean, depends how you frame it, because Van Ness had to fend off of all of those attacks. Let's just say that D'Amelio was the more aggressive wrestler, and for Van Ness to fend off all those attacks and not let up the scoring. So in the end, if you win, I guess you did wrestle the better match, but D'Amelio certainly came out flying against Van Ness. So, but that one was close. That one was close. D'Amelio almost had his chances there. So it is a crowded 149 weight class, especially from the Big Ten Conference. 157, Tyler Kasak is ranked number 1 overall. No surprises here or anything like that. Meyer Shapiro slots in at number 2. And for Kasak, same thing. Just take care of business, win in the Big Ten tournament. Now, I know that there might be an argument, okay, well, Tyler Kasak does have the forfeit. That's because he went into concussion protocol. I don't know how you judge that there, because it is a head-to-head loss against an Ethan Miller, but the coaches clearly don't see an issue with that, so they have Kasak number 1 overall. And this is why I say that these rankings are important, not only because of the weight they carry going into the seeding, but it allows for Tyler Kasak to control his own destiny. So if he wins through the Big Ten tournament, okay, he's the number 1 seed. So he has essentially a head start here. It's also interesting that Ja'Cory Teemer's not ranked in these. I imagine that has to do with the volume of matches since he's been injured. Ryan Crookham wasn't ranked at 133 either, and you just know subjectively those are some really talented wrestlers. Ja'Cory Teemer did lose to Tyler Kasak, but he'd probably be 3rd in these rankings. I mean, Intermat has him ranked 3rd. Ryan Crookham's ranked number 1 in 133 when you look at Intermat or some other rankings as well. So the coaches definitely were going through their selection process, didn't include specific wrestlers if they didn't have enough matches. 157, I feel like this class is Tyler Kasak, Meyer Shapiro, and a Ja'Cory Teemer, and hopefully Ja'Cory Teemer. I mean, we've seen him wrestle here down the stretch, but you want him to be healthy for the sake of the competition. But I really think it's those 3 that run away with this class. 157 isn't as deep, and I go on the record with that now and watch somebody pull off the run of a lifetime and upset everybody along the way. But I don't think 157 is as deep as some other weight classes. Going to 165, Mitchell Mesenbrink is at the top. He is the undisputed favorite. We've seen him now time and time again just wrestle the likes of a Mikey Caliendo and dominate him the way that he does every time. I don't think anything changes here. Mesenbrink is the favorite, should be the favorite, and if he's not, you haven't really been paying attention to the 165 weight class. What I will take away from these rankings is that Terrell Barraclaw is ranked third. So we could get an all Penn State related 165 NCAA title. I don't know what necessarily separates Caliendo and Barraclaw. I think that Caliendo is really good and has stepped up his game. He's still far away from Mesenbrink. But does that mean that Barraclaw knows Mesenbrink, right? They were training partners for a period of time. Mesenbrink's the reason that Barraclaw is not at Penn State one of the reasons, right? I won't speak for Barraclaw here, but that Barraclaw wrestled at 165 and bounced around the lineup as a backup, and they brought in Mitchell Mesenbrink, and Barraclaw never got that chance to start at Penn State. So that would just be interesting with the 2 and 3 seeds. If Barraclaw knocks out Caliendo, then I think at some point, and maybe if the seeding's different and Barraclaw moves to the 4 spot, but I don't see that happening. I think he'll impress at the Big 12 tournament as it is. Now, he's certainly got to knock off some other wrestlers to maintain that spot. But Mesenbrink, Caliendo, and then Barraclaw at 1, 2, and 3 just makes for an interesting finish if that holds for the NCAA championships. Now let's get to 174, because I was shocked to see this. Levi Haines is the number 1 wrestler here at 174 from the coaches' rankings. Keegan O'Toole is number 5. While it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and this is where I'm going to start to tease into the conversation about, should the coaches have this much power with the rankings? Because there's chatter that they don't care, that they don't pay attention, because Keegan O'Toole, because of his match volume, you couldn't rank him in the second set of rankings as the coaches. So this somewhat, the accusation is this has to do with simply the coaches not paying attention or not caring enough to these rankings, and that's why Keegan O'Toole is 5th. We know that he's the number 1 wrestler. I'm not trying to debate that Levi Haines should be the number 1 guy, but now what this does is it gives Levi Haines more control. If Keegan O'Toole doesn't have the best tournament, and when I say that, what does that look like? I don't think he's going to lose in the quarterfinals or anything outside of the championship at the Big 12s. But if Dean Hamady happens to beat him, because I think Hamidy's close. I really think it's kind of like 141, 157 to an extent, where you have the top 3 wrestlers and then it's everybody else. There's really no consideration. And at 174, you have Keegan O'Toole, Levi Haines, and I don't think Dean Hamidy's far away. I think that Dean Hamady is whoever's in that semifinal. So there we go again, how Beau Bartlett needs to lock down the number 1 seed so that by process of elimination, Andrew Alirez and Jesse Mendez can knock each other out in that semifinal matchup. There you have it again with Levi Haines, Dean Hamady, and Keegan O'Toole. The number 1 seed is ultra important here. So if Levi Haines goes through the Big Ten tournament, picks up bonus points along the way, defeats most likely a Carson, I think he'll face a Carson Hartschla again, who he defeated in that Ohio State dual meet. I think that projects most likely as the Big Ten championship at 174. So if Haines does all of that, Hamady defeats O'Toole in Big 12s, then you have at least a debate. It's an open conversation about who should be the number 1 seed, because head-to-head matters. The top win category certainly matters. I know those carry a lot of weight, but so do those coach rankings. So if Keegan O'Toole happens to lose in the Big 12 tournament, and people might disagree with me in the comments, that's fine, but I'm still going to say that it could happen. It's not a guarantee that he defeats Dean Hamady. And therefore, that opens up the possibility for Levi Haines to be that number 1 seed overall going into the NCAA championships. 184, 197, and heavyweight plus, should the coaches have this much say when they're not paying attention to the rankings that they need to put out? Allegedly. We're going to get into all of that and more coming up after the break. Today's show is also brought to you by PrizePicks. March basketball is almost here, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, it's easy, and it keeps every game exciting. You build your lineup, so throughout the week, you can pick your favorite players. You can select players that are interesting to you based on their projections. Do you think that Jason Tatum, for example, will have more or less than his points projection? Or how about an Anthony Davis? Will he have more or less on his rebound projection? It's quick and it's easy. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds and then stay engaged in the game all game long. And then fast payouts. When you win, your money will hit your account in as little as 15 minutes. There's no waiting around. And there's other specialty deals. PrizePicks even offers weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you get discounted player projections for even more value. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is PrizePicks. PrizePicks, run your game. Let's get through this final group of weight classes and talk about maybe a solution. I have a solution to how because the coach rankings are fairly controversial here, so I have a solution to how that could change things and maybe help with NCAA seeding overall. Carter Starocci, number 1 overall, no surprises there. The RPI rankings are interesting. I want to bring those up. They're just supposed to be an objective measure because it measures everything based on the data. And Carter Starocci, for whatever reason, is number 9 overall. Dustin Plott is actually number 1. Parker Kukaisen's number 5. So we're not really going to consider the RPI, and that's why they only hold 10% when the RPI only holds 10% when it comes to. That still seems like a large amount of weight carried into the seeding consideration there. But Carter Starocci's number 1 for the coaches. We won't talk about the RPI. We're just going to ignore the data's wrong. The data's wrong. So Starocci at number 1, Kukaisen at number 2. I think it's interesting that Dustin Plott is still at number 3. I don't know exactly when the vote was tallied. I got to imagine it happened fairly quickly after that Iowa-Oklahoma State duel. And I don't know how you can rank Dustin Plott at number 3 when he just lost to Angelo Ferrari, who... Yes, I think Angelo Ferrari would most likely be top 5 in these rankings if he was a full-time starter, but he's not. So he doesn't have a ranking. So therefore, Dustin Plott lost to an unranked true freshman. That should knock you down a little bit. So Max McAnally, Silas Allred, Gabe Arnold's ranked number 7 in these rankings. So if we're trying to use this as a projection, a very early projection for NCAAs, Carter Starocci and Gabe Arnold still don't meet because the 1 and the 7 seed won't necessarily meet until the championship because the 7 seed's on that other side of the bracket with the 2 seed. So Parker Kukaisen would most likely knock out Gabe Arnold in the quarterfinal there. So unless the seeding changes, we still won't see Starocci versus Gabe Arnold at the end of the day. And Iowa would be crazy to enter. You went all through all this trouble to redshirt Angelo Ferrari. You do not pull his red shirt to go into the postseason to just prove a point. You want to be strategic, and Iowa needs to be strategic if they want to get anywhere close to Penn State. So they'd be silly to do it. I encourage them to do it, though. For the sake of the Penn State-Iowa battle, I encourage them to put Angelo Ferrari in this postseason and burn his red shirt. Aside from that point, an interesting match that I can't wait to see at Big Tens, would like to see at NCAAs, Max McAnally against Carter Starocci. I think McAnally has all the potential in the world. Starocci, going into his 5th NCAA season, is in a better spot than McAnally, but dude hasn't lost. McAnally is a true freshman, has been really something to watch over the course of this season. And I want to see that matchup. Like, kind of same thing I want to see with Gabe Arnold and Carter Starocci. Just how much of a gap is it between a McAnally and a Starocci? So that one's interesting to keep an eye on there. And maybe McAnally does all. I don't know that Dustin Plott, depending on if he rebounds at the Big 12 tournament, I don't know that he holds on to that 3 spot at the end of the day, the seeding. And then again, McAnally would most likely project to lose to Starocci, right? So how does that factor in? Because Dustin Plott definitely has at least an opportunity to make up for his loss to Angelo Ferrari. Let's move to 197 because we got some other things to chat about. Josh Barr's number 2. And for Barr, his only loss to Stephen Buchanan. He's above Jacob Cardenas and AJ Ferrari, and I think that is correct. That is very much correct. Now, there might be a change. I could see this being similar to 149, where Jacob Cardenas, that went down to tiebreaker. So it's not like Barr has this clear distance from Cardenas. No, he just landed the final punch. And Cardenas could be out for revenge. They're going to meet based on this. The top 3 wrestlers in this weight class are all from the Big Ten. So this is an early look at the Big Ten seeding, where Buchanan's going to be number 1 and most likely take on an Isaiah Salazar from Minnesota. So for Barr, he has a crash course with Jacob Cardenas for that Big Ten semifinal. So that means you got to go through Cardenas to ultimately get back to Buchanan. And you know that Cardenas is going to have revenge on the mind. So that's going to have an impact there. And if Barr comes up short, if he happens to against Cardenas, which would not surprise me in the slightest. Again, they were close. That wasn't a dominant victory. That could have gone either way. Barr was just able to outlast him. And I know that counts in the scheme of things, but Cardenas is definitely going to take notes and learn from that too. So Barr's got to be careful. And the same thing in the conversation with Buchanan. It's going to be Buchanan waiting in the championships for one of them. And I don't know that AJ Ferrari should be considered a favorite anymore in this one. I've said it in the past. I think I was giving a lot of credit to Ferrari just because of what he did in his freshman season. I don't know that he looks like the same wrestler that's essentially on the eye test. He's also wrestling a lot of weak competition throughout the season because of where he's at right now. He's not at a premier school. So I really think it's these 3, Buchanan, Barr, and Cardenas, and any of them that would match up against Ferrari in the NCAA championships would beat him. Let's go to heavyweight. No surprises here. Gable Stevenson's number 1 and Greg Kerkvliet is number 2. Wyatt Hendrickson is number 3. There's not really a lot of takeaways here. I saw some chatter that, Greg Kerkvliet could be ranked possibly 4th or 5th in the NCAA championship seeding because of, again, the different weight in criterion. That would be bad, because then you would match up with Gable Stevenson in the quarterfinals the semifinals, as opposed to the championship. And then that would change points, assuming that Kerkvliet loses. Now, if he pulls off the upset, we're going to get a glimpse of that, because these 2 are on a crash course at the Big Ten championships. It's going to be Stevenson versus Kerkvliet in the heavyweight title for Big Tens. We'll see. And that they should be 1 and 2 at NCAAs as well. So the coaches have this one right. And I don't know how you could get that wrong. So there were a lot of other wrestlers. This was focused on Penn State primarily and a little bit of Big Ten, because that's what we're concerned about here on Locked On Nittany Lions. I know, right, a Penn State podcast is focusing on Penn State primarily, but there was a lot of concern about these coach rankings because select wrestlers were ranked above certain other guys that they had lost to in head-to-head dual meets and stuff like that. For example, okay, this is a small one, but Caleb Smith losing to Luke Lilledahl, but he's ranked 1 spot ahead of him. So it created a lot of confusion, and the solution is, yes, you actually dial back the power that the coaches have in these rankings. You don't take it away, but you dial it back, because if it is true, if the accusations are true that the coaches do not take this seriously, do not respond to these rankings, they don't all participate when that is their job, when it is you're doing this is the 3rd time you've had to answer a ranking survey and you can't do it. I get it. Their job's busy. I've never been a Division I coach, so I'm not even going to try to relate. But this is a simple task that you are aware of. And it's not every single coach. There are a select group of coaches that have this responsibility. So if those accusations, again, are true and the coaches aren't holding up their end of the bargain, then yes, this needs to change, because this is the third most important category when it comes to selecting the NCAA championship seeding. So it matters. It matters at the end of the day. What I would do is create another subjective category, because I did the RPI, for the lack of a better way to describe it, it made me sick. Seeing the RPI rankings, certain wrestlers were missing because they didn't have enough matches. For example, a Braeden Davis, and then Carter Starocci at number 9. I don't even know that you can consider RPI. You should consider, but there are a lot of other people that scout and do their own rankings for these wrestlers. Why not have a cluster, kind of like a college football playoff committee? You have an NCAA rankings committee that doesn't know. They don't make all of the selections, but they put together a rankings list, and then that is another portion. So it's just another way to judge the wrestlers at the end of the day. And it's the more the merrier. The more influences you have, the better these rankings are going to be, the more concise they're going to be, and not left up for interpretation. Coaches are worried about their teams and their wrestlers primarily. Whereas if you have a devoted committee, they can, now I get it. There's kind of this, well, how subjective are they going to be? Are they going to be partial or biased to certain wrestlers or certain programs? Maybe, but that's why you get multiple voices. That's why you get 4 or 5 different scouts to put these rankings together. And then you use that as a portion. So they get 25%. The coaches get 25%. Head-to-head competition gets 25%. And then you pick another category from there. But I think a rankings committee to help out with that, and you should do that for the conference tournaments. You should do that for NCAAs as well. I don't think this is just about NCAAs. So if the coaches aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, the consensus was that these rankings made little to no sense as opposed to the most sense at the end of the day. And that's an issue when they do hold value to finish up the season. So that's where I'm going to leave it there. I don't think that's controversial at all. I'm not saying you remove the coaches out of it because are they going to be biased towards their program? Sure. But I think objectively for the sport, they kind of give that most neutral voice, that most neutral interpretation, I would hope, when you take the rankings seriously to judge these wrestlers. But a committee is certainly important. And that's, if you want to grow the sport, that's how you do it. You just get more and more people involved at the end of the day. And that'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of this conversation because I think there is a debate, a conversation to be had as far as how the seeding is overall handled. And I don't think why there is no reason why they can't change anything for the better. If you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast to keep up with Penn State wrestling and all your favorite Penn State sports teams, Penn State football, Penn State men's basketball as well. Please leave a like on this episode. Share it with friends and family. We are Locked On Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, got to check out Locked On Big Ten with host Craig Sheeman. Craig puts the Big Ten first when everybody else seems to overlook it and covers all 18 teams in depth, including Penn State. You can find Locked On Big Ten available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and it is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day.